You are watching Cover to Cover, talk about the books that move you and the authors that write them. Hosted by Dr. Jess Haggerty. Cover to Cover is an original local production recorded live and produced at the Kinetic in downtown DuBois, offering a high-tech creative space for public and private events of all types, business meetings and presentations, and educational workshops and classes. The Kinetic is revolutionizing how business and education is being conducted in DuBois, directly across from the DuBois Public Library. Learn more at thekinetic.org. Major underwriting support has been provided by XI3 Corporation. XI3 is breaking technological boundaries in modular computing with its award-winning and patented XI3 computer architecture. XI3 Corporation builds modular systems that deliver greater versatility, scalability, limitless applications, and cost savings to customers worldwide. XI3 has a family of small form factor PCs that sport green, energy-efficient technologies, as well as a complete lineup of complementary servers and other enterprise-class machines, technologies, and products. XI3 allows customers to lower their computing costs by quickly and easily designing and producing customized solutions and allowing them to update, modify, and upgrade their systems with new functionalities. XI3 Corporation, modular computers with green technology and extended useful life. Visit them online at xi3.com. Additional local underwriting support has been provided by our friends at Stu's Brew Coffee House in downtown DuBois, offering a wide variety of fair trade organic coffees and specialty drinks, fresh, locally made baked goods, and daily lunch specials featuring all natural nitrate-free meats. Visit Stu's for live entertainment events such as open mic and trivia nights. And remember, Stu's coffees are also available to take home by the pound. Visit them online at stewsbrew.com.
Welcome to another great episode of Cover to Cover. I'm your host, Dr. Jess Haggerty. Tonight we're going to be talking with Tom Thomas, a local author from this area, and we're going to talk about two of his books. We're going to start out with Give or Take a Pebble, the beginning, and then we're going to also be talking about Give or Take a Shilling, Discovery. We'd also like to take the time to thank the major underwriting support that came from XI3 Corporation, as well as the local underwriting that's provided by our friends at Stu's Brew Coffee House. Thanks for being here tonight with us, Tom.
I'm glad to be here.
Great. Well, I have a couple questions for you about the book.
Okay.
Kind of wanted to start with the idea. For our viewers at home, they may not realize that your books are actually based off of another very well-known story. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you started with the ideas for these books? Well,
like everybody that enjoys Christmas, I watched and read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. But I found that I wanted to know more about them after, you heard how he turned into this lovely gentleman and so on and so forth. But what happened to the Cratchits? What happened to Fred? What happened? I also was very concerned about every time I watched a movie based on A Christmas Carol, there were different names used, there were different relationships used, there were all kinds of things used. For instance, why was Scrooge at the boarding house? Anybody know? In one it says that it was because his mother died at birth. Then you watch another one and it shows a much younger fan come in to greet him, and you say, okay, well, died at birth and a younger daughter or a younger sister? That doesn't work. So what Dickens provided for me was some great outlines of characters, and I was allowed to go in and create backstories and create the colors and the hues and all the other things that go into making a real good character, and that's where it started.
Excellent, and I think you do a very successful job in kind of bringing those characters to life and giving them a lot of different depth and making them very real, not just as fictional characters, as people that we could see actually living during those times. One of the things that you kind of focus a great deal of time on in the first book is dealing with Tiny Tim's illness. So can you tell us a little bit about that process in, first the rickets and then, coming to this understanding of a deeper issue? How did you learn, I guess, about what his symptoms were? Did you take that from Dickens? Did you take some literary freedoms with that?
Most of his symptoms were in Dickens. His short stature, his weak joints, his most of that. And that's why rickets was first brought in, because those are also the symptoms of rickets, or were the symptoms of rickets. So that's why Crump, who is not a diagnostic physician, he is a surgeon, went that route. And then when he came to a dead end, or he prescribed what he thought would cure the issue, and it didn't, then he relied on his friend from college, Dr. Gibson, who is a prominent London physician, and he visited him, and when the questions or the conversation went back and forth with them, he was pretty well set on where he needed to go. And fortunately, on the carriage ride back from Gibson's house to Camden Town, he was visited by one of his frequent dreams, and came up with the conclusion of what he needed to do. Excellent.
And that is a great scene where he's stumbling into his driver and kind of piecing things together. Something else that I wanted to talk about was all of the various different storylines that you have going on. Because at first you might think, okay, well, this is a story about Tiny Tim, but really it's not, right? We have Crump's storyline. We have, Murphy, who comes in at the very beginning even. We're not quite sure who he is and why he's meeting with Ebenezer Scrooge and where he fits, and we don't see until later. So that was kind of a very complicated storyline that you had to weave through so that it made sense later. We just have so many different characters and so many different side stories that are happening. Tell me a little bit about how you managed to keep those straight, if they were all there at the start, or if different characters had to be created to kind of help you achieve different goals.
I took a writing course, and my teacher told me I needed to put a timeline and identify all the characters and so on. And I tried that for about 5 minutes. These characters show up, and Murphy was just supposed to be some background. He wasn't supposed to be a major character. But then he took on a life of his own. And when he said, hey, we got to do this, I said, okay, we'll do this. And that's how that went. I think of my books as a mashup of, if you've watched the PBS series Faces in America, where celebrities go researching their heritage, and they go all over the place researching it and so forth. My books, and there'll be 4 of them when it's all said and done, is that part, and It's a Wonderful Life. So if you can think about things that happened in 1844, which is where the first book begins, and in 2010, where the last book ends, you're going to find that a good deed done in 1844 gets repaid in 2010.
Oh, now I'm very curious about how that will play out.
So I had to introduce a physician, and I didn't think that Belinda would get attached to the doctor, but she did, and that took on its own storyline. And like I said, when I write a skeleton scene, and then I go back in and I just rewrite and rewrite and rewrite until I like what I've written.
Would you say that one central scene kind of has guided you through this, or multiple scenes at different points?
Boy, I never thought about that. What I've tried to do is start at the beginning and carry with a logical progression through to the end, not emphasizing any one scene. What I really wanted to do is really show 1844 living conditions and the art of being a surgeon, or the art of being a wet nurse, all those things. It's not what it is today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it definitely is. And I have questions for you about that we're going to get to in a little bit about some of your research process. But something that I thought was really interesting, we get through book one, we've learned so much about these characters, we've got to see some amazing scenes, and then when we get to book two, it is much darker. It is dealing with a lot of the things that were hinted at in the first book. But what I found most interesting about Give or Take a Shilling was the flashbacks. We have lots and lots of flashbacks that kind of help us see maybe what happened and how, for instance, Scrooge got to be how he was. So what was your point in bringing those in there after we'd already seen kind of his change, his becoming this great man? Why was it important for you as the writer to show us that he's actually returning rather than suddenly becoming?
Well, I didn't want Scrooge to get lost. My website is called Scrooge, Not Just at Christmas Anymore. And when you have a website with that title, you got to keep him around and you got to get him some depth. What did we know about Scrooge from A Christmas Carol? We knew very, very little, other than, he grew up, he was off to a boarding school. Why? As I said earlier, there's various reasons. I wanted to define the reasons. I wanted to define why Scrooge went there. I wanted to define how he met Marley. Where did Marley come from? In A Christmas Carol, where did he come from? How did they mate up? How did they get together? So, again, because Dickens gave me just outlines of characters, it allowed me to go in and flesh out anything I wanted to flesh out. And I tried to keep Scrooge as honest as an individual as I could, and I think I've done that. And every other character that I've created, I've tried to give them an honest feel.
Great, and I think you've definitely succeeded with that. So at this point, we're going to pause for a short break here. Again, we would like to thank XI3 Corporation. You can find out a little bit more about them at xi3.com, and Stu's Brew Coffee House for helping underwrite this production. And we'll be right back.
Are you looking for a unique advertising opportunity for your business? Scared of the high cost of reaching new customers? Thanks to DuBois TV working with us, we've had fresh talent come in and create various forms of TV shows just for you. Shows that are entertaining, technical, and above all, educational. Even more so is that our shows are fun and exciting for people of all ages. So come on, check out DuBoisTV.net with original content filmed and produced here at the Kinetic. Sponsor our TV shows and you can be seen on YouTube, Facebook, even during live webcasts, and be loved by people from all over. What are you waiting for? Sponsor a show today and you'll become a hero. Join the digital revolution with DuBois TV and the Kinetic. Minds in motion.
Welcome back to Cover to Cover. I'm Dr. Jess Haggerty, and I'm here with Tom Thomas, our local author. Thank you again for joining us tonight, Tom.
My pleasure.
So before the break, I mentioned that I had some questions I wanted to ask you about your research. and how you got to all of this very rich, detailed information. So where did you start? Where did your research process start?
Once I had Crump be a surgeon, I had to find the tools of his trade. So I went into, I even went into eBay to try to find tools of the 1844 surgeon.
Wow.
So I could see what he used. There was one scene, you mentioned Murphy in one scene, where he's looking at a calendar and the date of the scene is like April 1st. And April 1st in 1844 was the Monday before Good Friday. And up until 350 AD, or BC, Christ's birth was April 1st, or celebrated April 1st. And he makes the statement, we could have him born and killed in the same week. That piece of information came up by just looking at the dates of a calendar and seeing that this happened. So a lot of my research was not planned, but happened. The rest of it, I really dug into. I even went to my personal physician and said, "Are these the symptoms of this disease?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "And how would you treat this?" And he told me exactly how to treat it. So I used every resource, internet primarily, to try to make it as right as I could make it.
Now, after you had kind of immersed yourself in that research, how did you pick through all of the pieces of information and determine what to include and what not to include?
Well, again, if you're reading a book, you want detail, but you don't want so much detail that you as a reader get confused with it. So, I picked my spots where I had Crump using all the things to make pills and all the things to make his other remedies, and I picked the spot, made my point, and moved on.
Was there anything that came up during your research that surprised you about the era?
There was, and it's going to show up in book 3.
Ah, okay, another teaser. So was there anything that you had kind of envisioned already for your storyline that had to change once you started doing research?
There was, and I wish I could tell you what it was, but I know there was a whole section that I had to just rip out and start all over with.
Oh, wow.
But that was because I didn't do it exactly right. And when I got to this point over here, it said, that's not how it worked over here. You're going to have to rework it. So went back and redid it. The first book took 2.5 years to write. And a lot of that was due to the first time, all the research, and when you make the mistake, you have to throw it away and start again.
Oh, and I bet that's hard. Heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
So you have, I can understand how you would easily be able to find a lot of the medical details, but you also have a lot of details and a lot of researched information kind of about the underbelly of things in London for Murphy, and then in the second book for Rudy and Mac. So how did you kind of find out those pieces of information about how they kind of made their lives?
I watched Great Expectations and some time back. And the one thing that I took from that show was there was a gentleman hiding in a bog. One of the main characters was hiding in a bog, and he came out and was so mean and so filthy and so. But on the other side, when the gentleman, the main character, offered him a piece of pie, he became something totally different. So I wanted my characters to have both sides of them, so that they could be mean and rough and tough. Murphy and Rudy are going to be street thugs, and so I tried to fancy what would a street thug do, and where would he live, and how would he act.
Great. And I think we see quite a bit of development in Rudy in the second book. You know, he starts out as this kid who's running away, and in the end, it's quite a bit more lethal. Are we going to be seeing more of Rudy in the later books?
Rudy is in book 3 as well.
Okay.
Yes, major player in book 3.
Okay. Now, would you say you have a different protagonist for each book, or do you think that the story is shared by all of the characters?
I call it an assemblage of characters, and they each take their own time on stage.
Great. Now, you did mention about your characters having those two sides, and that brings to mind a phrase that comes up quite often in the book, and that is the angels and demons. Tell me a little bit about what that means. Are you speaking metaphorically? You know, at certain points I wondered if Crump maybe was a little schizophrenic. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we all have them. When we're faced with a critical decision, personally or professionally, we'll sit there and we'll say, this is what I want to do. No, you don't want to do that. You want to do something else. And Crump really has a problem with his demons more than his angels. And Belinda also had issues with the angels and demons. And it wore on her quite a bit, as we see how she really at one point decides that the way she was headed was not the path she should have been on, and she was going to change her entire life and become a nun because of all that conflict that's inside her.
It was kind of the easier way out, but then of course she doesn't go that road after all. Even though she continually comes back to it. Another very interesting character that I wanted to talk about is Jonathan Gibson, and some of the choices you made in crafting his character and his storyline. So what prompted that? What prompted it can almost be seen almost as a political statement in some ways. What just who he is and what happens to him.
Well, Jonathan Gibson is a royal physician. The Queen consults him if she has any issues in her family. He is that good at what he does, but he has a lot to hide. And in Pebble, I spend a lot of time on the relationship between Gibson and Crump in their college years. I often say that was the first bromance in literature. And he married for status, and then he is what he is. I have never seen a friend honor a friend as Crump did Gibson.
I agree.
And that is how deep that friendship was, even though Crump really liked to rock it, really liked to pull Gibson apart at times. But deep down, it was real.
Great. And I think your characters, they struggle with a lot. There's a lot of tragedy that's through this book. Some of the tragedies, have happy endings, like Tiny Tim's case. Others not so much, as perhaps, we see with Gibson's case. How did you strike a balance with that to keep your reader kind of engaged enough to keep going, but not disheartened enough to kind of give up?
Well, I can't say that I did that very successfully. I had many of my readers tell me that Murphy shouldn't have died.
He was just such a great chameleon character.
He was such a guy. As you mentioned earlier, there were so many characters building up, and there's going to be more characters building up. And to keep the storylines right and to keep the character fresh, I had to lose some of them. And you carry him so far, he become, I had one person say that when I started reading about him, I hated him. By the time he was gone, I didn't want him to go. And that's when you got it right.
Yeah, he certainly had his moment of redemption at the end.
He did.
So, and I like to see in different parts of Give or Take a Shilling, we see Rudy kind of learning, trying to find out more about Murphy. So I think even from his grave, perhaps he's a little bit of a mentor for young Rudy.
Not that it's a spoiler alert or anything, but in book 3, Rudy actually changes his name.
I can guess what that would be. I'll let our folks at home take their guesses on that too, but that's interesting. As we're nearing the end of the segment here, I want to ask just about a couple very special scenes. And I'm going to start with the dark. That with the scene that we kind of end with Gibson is very, very, it's hard. It's very hard to watch or to read. As I knew I was getting there, I actually put the book down last night and said, I'm not going to read this till tomorrow because I need to, feel good going to sleep tonight. So you have that, but then you also have beautiful scenes that kind of bring you to tears for the other reason, like in Pebble, where you're talking about the Christmas scene and Scrooge is there surrounded by, his family and friends and everyone's getting these wonderful, wonderful gifts. So where do you get that detail? Where do you pull that from?
They tell me what to write. They tell me what to write. Gibson was identified in Pebble with some issues, and to move on, we had to identify what it was, and we did it, as my mother said, too gory, but it was what it was. People did things like that then, and the scene, you mentioned the Christmas scene. The one that I like is when Scrooge, after the Christmas party, gets back to his house and he finds in his pocket the bag of soldiers, and it just brought it back that. And he says to Marley, "Oh, I got soldiers this year, not chains." That scene was right for me.
Wonderful. Well, Tom, we really appreciate you being here with us, and I know that we have plenty of viewers at home who probably would love to get the chance to talk to you, as I've had the opportunity to tonight. And I know you're going to be available to do some signing of books and some chatting with some of your fans. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I've gotten with Derek at Stu's Brews, and we're going to put together a book signing. It's on March 22nd, which is a Saturday, and it starts at noon, and I'm going to be there until the last person gets what they want.
Excellent. So you might be there all night.
Could be there all night. Let's hope.
And for people who are our viewers who are a little bit farther away, how can they find out a little bit more about you and about the books?
My website is ScroogeNotJustAtChristmasAnymore.com, and it's all one word, .com, and it's a great web page that gives them insights into both books and how they can get them. They're also available at the major bookstores.
Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for watching another episode of Cover to Cover. This is Dr. Jess Haggerty from the stage at the Kinetic in downtown DuBois. We'd like to encourage you to go out and check out Tom's book, Give or Take a Shilling and Give or Take a Pebble. And we'd also like to thank the major underwriting support provided by XI3 Corporation and additional support provided by Stu's Brew Coffee House. We'll look forward to seeing you in our next episode.